Kodak Instamatic that I got for 50 cents and a ton of box tops from Kellogg's. I received that camera. I was taking photos all the time. I would say that, of course, there was a lot of time between 8 years old and when I became what I would consider a professional photographer. So that was 8 years ago. That would have been eight years old would have been 42 years ago. So 52 years ago. Yeah, 52. I'm making myself younger. But I'm primarily a landscape photographer. I love nature. It speaks to me. It's where I see God. And truly, all of my art that I work on, I try to show people the face of God. I have a deep faith. Not necessarily, I would say it's a hybrid of different concepts and ideas, but I'm just trying to show people the face of God. And so, like I said, I'm normally a landscape and nature photographer, but in recent years, I've been really concerned about the divide that we have in this country. And I wanted to do something with my work to help people find one another in a way that we can find maybe common ground and focus on that versus focusing on our differences. And I started something called the Gratitude Project, where I photograph people while they sit and think about gratitude. And so I take those photos, I get a word, I post those photos to Facebook and Instagram. Don't really have a long range plan with that other than I want to keep doing it. But this current project really was born of the idea of the Gratitude Project. We knew that we wanted this month or this show at the art gallery to be about essential workers and to kind of think about what's been happening in this past year. And we were thinking about the Gratitude Project, but we thought that maybe it was not, it didn't hold the gravity that we would want to make an impact, and kind of put it on steroids. And I decided to go out and meet people who were different, people who fit the categories of all the things that are in current events for this year. People who are impacted by COVID. I started with essential workers and it went on to be more general than that. People who have had COVID, essential workers, just people who have been impacted in one way or another by COVID. People of color, that in reaction to the riots, to the protests, Black Lives Matter. So I thought, you know, a lot of people don't know a Black person. So I thought I would tell the stories of a few of the Black folks. And then there was a Supreme Court ruling making the Civil Rights Act of, I think, 1964 or 1965. They said that that could apply to the LGBTQ IA community, and so that no one could be fired based upon any of the sexual preference or gender identities, anything like that. So all of the images that I have and all of the stories were collected from people who kind of fit into this year's category. So I'm honored that every one of them participated. People became vulnerable. They allowed me to photograph them. They gave me their stories without filtering, and allow me to share that with other people, which is pretty amazing. So.
Great. So you can, I'm going to make you host here so you can have control of your slideshow here that you've got, but you will have to watch for people joining too.
Okay. Okay. All right. I see Tiffany just joined us. So yes. That's okay. If it says more after a person, does that mean anything?
No, I don't.
No, okay. All right, well, okay, so the name of the exhibit, of course, is A Time to Heal. And the how did you tell me to get the full screen on this?
Go right over to From the Beginning.
There we go. There we go. I got it. Yep. One of the participants, so I have in, pardon me.
I don't know if I'm on here. I can't hear.
You can't hear? Who is that that's asking? Is that Tiffany?
Yes, Tiffany.
I can see you, Tiffany.
I can hear you now. You can see me? Okay.
Okay.
I can see
Renee.
See you. And I can see Erica. I'm sorry. I'm saying it wrong, aren't I?
Erica.
Erica. Okay.
And then, yeah, and then
I can see you. You're frozen.
Photos.
You're completely frozen.
So, okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and talk. The first image is of a interracial couple. Chris is Indian and Meg is a white Catholic girl from Columbus. And they spoke to me on matters of racism. They spoke to me about things that they've gone through as a couple. The church that Meg went to refused to marry them because of the race issue. But they really have a very happy marriage. They have 2 children together. But they do occasionally have, I would say, less direct racism, less direct discrimination, but people will get up and move away from them when they're at the theater, or a lot of comments about their children, you know, as far as being exotic and that sort of thing. So, so they were the first people that I talked to, the way that I did the images is that I took images for most people while they were talking to me, so that I could get kind of more of a real and raw image. And then in this particular image, I photographed where they were married. So the pagoda, and I know that's not called a pagoda, but the right word isn't coming to me, is where they were married. So Chauncey was a student at City High, and he was unable to graduate from high school in the normal way. He didn't get to go through a ceremony. He also was in a special program for smart kids, which would give him something called an international baccalaureate degree. And it basically allows a student to skip their first year of college. And so because he wasn't able to do the testing, he didn't get his international baccalaureate degree. And so that was kind of a drag for him, because had he gone to a high school that did AP courses, he would have had a lot of that taken care of. So right now he's kind of repeating at Grand Rapids Community College classes that he's already taken. So this is a woman who works at a health department. And she really is an admin person, but the top photo, you can see that she's really stressed out. She's on a medical leave for stress, and she just was exposed to COVID daily without being given the PPEs that were necessary to keep her safe when she was working with that population. And so it wore on her so heavily that she ended up kind of having a little breakdown. So the top photo is her. She's really stressed out. We talked for about 4 hours. And the one on the lower right is she was telling me about how much she had missed singing and how she didn't know when she would be able to be in her choir again, and she would never be able to sing for anybody again. And I asked her to sing for me. And so she had just sung Amazing Grace. And so you can see the relief between the top picture and the one on the right. After about 4.5 hours of talking, she said, I feel good enough for the first time in over 2 weeks to get dressed. Do you care if I go get dressed? And so she actually put on a dress and a little bit of makeup. So it goes really from the very beginning of that to the end. And so that was, that's amazing to me. That really tells me how important it is for all of us to be heard and seen. So, so that's Julie. This is Kwame. He's a fellow artist at the gallery. And he has a lot to say about Black Lives Matter. He is one of the kindest men, and he doesn't say a whole lot of negative stuff. So he basically says that we're exactly where we need to be at this time. We're facing the struggles that we need to face in order to grow. And he says basically that we're fundamentally in this together and that we all need to figure out a way to get along and to make it better. And so I really respect Kwame a great deal. He did decide to run for the Muskegon school board after we had this meeting, just kind of stepping up to do more for the community. So I did go to Grand Rapids, and the mural behind him is one that was put up after all the destruction from the night of rioting that they had. And then this woman is a respiratory therapist. Her name is Cindy, and she worked at one of the most hard-hit hospitals in the Detroit area with COVID. And she herself is a COVID survivor. She didn't have it as seriously as a lot of people, but she had been over it for about a month. And I think it was like 300 feet from her van to the picnic table. And she just could barely walk that distance still. So fatigue is extreme for her. I think the photo at the top is the one that is the most compelling for me. She had just told me that the hospital she worked at was St. Mary's down there, and there's a convent that's connected, and a lot of the nuns in the convent come over and volunteer. And she just told me that 11 of the nuns that volunteer at the hospital had died from COVID. And that's a lot. And now I think it's up to 13 or 17 of those nuns have died. And so her heart is broken there. She worked with those women. She's used to people dying because she works in that field. But it was really hard for her to see those people that she adored pass. The problem in her hospital was not respirators, like you will hear about Henry Ford Hospital and some of the other hospitals. Theirs was dialysis machines. They only had 2, and at any given time, they might have 20 people who needed dialysis. Dialysis, when you're at that level of illness, needs to be 24/7. And the doctors were having to choose which persons could get it for 12-hour shifts. So they were choosing 4 out of the 75 COVID patients that they had. They had to decide who was most likely to survive. And so I personally wouldn't want to be that doctor. So, anyway, so this is Sienna. She is my youngest and my most controversial person. I thought we were going to talk about climate change, but we were talking about social climate change. She is involved in an organization called no, I think it's on here. Sunrise Movement. And they are interested in restructuring our police force. So, and that's a hard topic for a lot of people. And when I realized that was what we were talking about, I'll just be honest, I was a little gun shy about it. But I did learn a lot about her and a lot about why she feels the way she does. When she was 10 years old, she listened to Donald Trump talk about building a wall because all Mexicans were criminals and rapists and drug addicts and drug pushers, and she's Mexican American. And so at 10 years old, she just really felt unsafe. She had already started hearing people say, why don't you go back home? And she's an American citizen. Her parents are American citizens. So when you learn the backstory, whether you agree with somebody or not, it does sort of make sense that she feels really unsafe. So I found her really interesting. I think she'll change the world. I think she's very idealistic right now. But I don't know that this is the area that she'll change the world in, but I do. She was a sparkler, and I was glad to get to know her. Jill is the executive director of Pioneer Services in Muskegon, and she is a COVID survivor, and she had it really bad. I'm not sure how old she is, but she got it in April. She is still today has trouble with fatigue. She'll probably have something like asthma the rest of her life. But she was in service to a gentleman that was living in one of their residential homes. There weren't enough test kits for everyone to be tested that needed to be tested in the beginning of the pandemic. He was turned away one day, and to make sure that he was tested, she went back with him the next day to be tested. She was covered in PPE except for goggles, but they feel that probably at the testing site is where she got it. They lost several residents to the illness. The reason her piece is called Witness is because during her illness, she would get on Facebook every day and still do her daily devotional live with her friends, with her Facebook friends. I just thought that took a lot of courage to get online and still share your passion for God, for Jesus. So really nice lady. This woman works, is Shauna Hunter. She works at Pathfinders in Muskegon, and that's Muskegon and Muskegon Heights. At-risk youth can go there to Pathfinders for meals, tutoring. It's a safe place. Muskegon Heights has had a lot of issues with crime, people killing each other. There was actually a young man who killed his, he shot his father and killed his father's girlfriend just, I think yesterday. So they're trying to work really hard to make things better in that community. She talks a lot about education isn't really all that interesting when you're hungry and when you're just trying to figure out how to get by. So they're trying to work with that level of, lifting hope. They invite the police departments from all around the communities to their location and introduce those people, the kids, to the police so that they know one another. So rather than defunding a police force, they're more interested in having the community get to know one another, so they're not fearful of one another, so they know that they have help when they need it. This one has no image of a person because the person lives in Florida, but this is my friend Dodie. She's a bereavement counselor for hospice, and she talks about COVID not in the sense of people dying from COVID, but the people who have loved ones in hospitals, in long care facilities, that can't visit their loved ones, people who have lost their loved ones in hospitals. There's a lot of guilt, shame, just a lot of pain for people who have lost their loved ones without being able to be there. The thing that hit me the hardest is that personally, my mom asked me, she was afraid to die alone, and she asked me to hold her hand if I would be there when she passed. And I was able to do that. And I wondered how many people actually had made that promise to a parent or a loved one and weren't able to do it because of COVID, because they couldn't go to see that loved one. And so she talks a lot about how the folks can't have closure with their loved one because they weren't there when they died. A lot of the bodies were just moved from the hospital or the nursing home to the funeral home, and the bodies were cremated instead of having the wishes of the family carried out because there were so many. And so there's all kinds of issues with closure. People just can't even believe their loved one is really gone. So one of the things she also talked about is they're gearing up for, they feel like there's going to be a lot more suicides, especially in the 30 to 40-ish range. Those folks are really struggling financially. They've got the burden of their kids at home. Nobody's sharing that. And so they're working a lot on suicide prevention now. This gentleman's name is Justin, and I think he's quite an inspiration. One of the reasons I did this project was because I feel like we're kind of in a mess right now. Again, you know, we talked about the divisiveness in the world, but I also think we have a lot of people who aren't willing to step out of their comfort zone to try to make things better. And so that's what I did here, is I definitely stepped out of my comfort zone to try to tell some stories. But Justin heard about the issues with the state of Ohio not having enough PPEs to protect their healthcare workers. And so what he did is he did have a relationship already with the state of Ohio. He'd worked with their school systems on some security things. But, you know, I've known Justin for a long time, and he's really kind of a normal guy. But he made a proposal in about 3 days, and he took it to somebody at the state of Ohio. And he said, hey, I think I can get the PPEs together for you guys. And he rented the they said yes, and he rented the second largest cargo plane in the world. He had it flown to China. He requisitioned all the PPEs that were needed for the state of Ohio for a good long time. And then he brought those back and began distributing them. If that's not enough, he decided that we depend too much on China. And he said, I'm going to requisition machines from somebody here in the United States. So he got in touch with some folks that worked, you know, in the auto industry up in Pontiac. And he said, can you make mask making equipment? They make 600 masks an hour, and they will make more. You know, there's more equipment coming. So he went from, you know, just being kind of a normal everyday guy to probably 12 employees. And he doesn't sleep. That's why the name of his piece is Sleepless. He told me that he would work there about 22 hours, and then he would crawl under his desk and sleep for 2 hours. His wife finally had the camper brought to the place, his distribution center, and said at least sleep on a real bed. And he said, and when I left, the last thing he said to me is, don't worry, Gail, I'll sleep tomorrow or the next day, or, you know, next week, next month. So I just really admire this guy, because he took a really bad situation.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I can't tell what you're saying, Tiffany.
Oh, can you hear me?
Can anybody else?
Nobody can hear
Yes,
me? Yes, you can hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I wanted to know, do you know,
I can hear you.
did this gentleman's story get told on national news? It seems like we seen him on the news.
Yeah, Tiffany,
Okay.
it probably was told on the news. He's really being asked to do a lot politically now. He's a member of the Young Republicans club, or whatever that is, organization, not a club. But he's really being groomed for office at some point. Okay. He just donated, I think, 500,000 masks to the poll workers in Ohio to keep them safe during voting.
Okay.
So he's a good guy. He's working hard to make a difference.
I seen him on the evening, like national news, I would say. Yeah.
Probably. Yep.
Yeah, he's quite
Right.
quite the guy.
This is JT. He's done a fantastic job. This is JT, and he is a gay teacher, and his story is actually kind of short. The reason there's a courthouse behind him is because of the Supreme Court ruling. He is a school teacher, and he loves his job so much. And he teaches 3rd grade, and a rumor ran around school last year that he was gay, which of course he is. But he was scared to death that he would lose his job. And, this bottom picture of him is when he's telling me how he feels about now that he can't get fired just based upon that. So, really good guy, and I suspect a really good teacher. So he's thrilled beyond belief that he can't get fired. This is my pastor. This is Pastor Sarah, and she spoke about racism. She really talked about that, it's just time for us to imitate the kingdom of heaven. We can't wait to imitate the kingdom of heaven. And her point is that God so loved the whole world that he gave his only son. And so in her mind, she's saying that we are all the same. So we need to learn how to get along here. And so she's an inspiration to me. She really planned on working with the Black community. She was involved with civil rights when she was 5 years old during, there was a lot of civil unrest in Grand Rapids when she was a kid. So she was in that. And then when it was time for her to get assigned to a church, they put her in the middle of the farm fields in Western Michigan. So she didn't really get to do, but I hear her speak almost every Sunday, and she's definitely a social justice kind of warrior. So this is Father Robert, and we talked about him earlier. His journey started when a gay student came to him when he was a high school counselor. And the kid came in and said, he was crying, and he said, I have a problem. And Father Robert said, what's the problem? And the kid said, well, I'm gay. And this was in the 70s. And Father Robert said, well, that's not a problem. It's okay. And he just really had never, ever thought that there was anything wrong with a person being gay. And so he learned the struggles that this person went through. And then he started to have support groups for gay kids. And then he worked during the AIDS epidemic at the very beginning of it. He worked in adult foster care saw all kinds of horrific things there with like the garage next to the place. His foster care was firebombed. People were so afraid of AIDS and what it was, and homosexuality in the late 80s was still quite taboo. So he helped out that community. He said mostly they provided hospice care. And then around the Muskegon area, he's tried several times to have community centers. And every time he gets settled someplace, something comes up and the community around doesn't want him there. A lot of times churches actually get involved and say, we don't need this in this neighborhood. We don't want this in this neighborhood. So he was affected by Leela Elkhorn's suicide, who was a transgender youth. She was so distraught that she couldn't find a place in this world that she walked down the road 4 miles from her parents' house and walked in front of a semi. And that's how she killed herself. She actually knew she was going to do that and set up a delayed post on her Tumblr blog with a suicide note. So it made a lot of changes. That girl had to go through something called conversion therapy, where her parents were quite fundamental in their Christian beliefs, and the conversion therapy is to try to persuade you or convince you that you're a normal, straight human being. So for her, all it did was make her feel less and more depressed and more hopeless. And so that broke his heart to the point that he helps everybody, but the transgender community is the community that he believes he serves most at this point. So this is Dr. Susan Bishop, and she's a pediatric doctor. And we talked about how COVID has changed practice. For her, they had limited amount of people that they could see at one time, and they had to determine how do we, there's so much misinformation, and information changed daily, so the way they saw patients changed all of the time. But they would meet people in Tyvek suits basically out in the parking lot. They couldn't get the normal PPEs, so the Tyvek suits were the best that they could do. And they would immediately disrobe when they'd get back in, and those were washed over and over and over. And then she said that one of the things that was good about having like a Zoom meeting like we're having right now with their patients is that there were some patients that they couldn't figure out why they couldn't do as they were asked to do. Why couldn't they do these simple things to make things better for their children? And when it came down to it, they saw in the Zoom that these people are just barely making it. They got to see into the people's homes, and they got to see what was happening around them, and so they understood it. But the thing that she misses the most is seeing the unmasked faces of her children that she works with. So many of the things that kids need to say to us are nonverbal and are said with expressions. And so she doesn't feel like she can treat her patients as well as she normally would because she can't see their faces. She can see them briefly, but then they have to mask back up. She misses their hugs. They're not allowed to hug anymore. Kids hug their doctors, apparently. And one of the things, she has this beautiful curly black hair. So her hair is a little exotic to these children, and the kids, it seems almost every day, half the kids will reach up and tug her hair. They want to feel her hair, and there's no more tugging of the hair. And she said she never thought she would ever miss something so simple, but she actually started to cry when she said how much she missed that tug of the hair. So, good woman. This is Saucy, and she's Latina, and she works for everyone, but she is working for social equity. She wants all families in Grand Rapids to have access to good jobs, to have good homes, good pay. She works, she has her own company called One Source. And there they provide job training. If somebody's struggling in their job, they can go to them to get help so that they can keep their job. Maybe their problem is that their car broke and they just need a ride. And so what they're doing is they're trying to keep people employed. She threw out a figure for me, and I really need to confirm it before I say it to too many people, but I worked at Mel Trotter homeless mission down there, so I think that it's pretty close. But she said that 1 in 8 Black families in Grand Rapids are homeless at one time or another. 1 in 168 white families are homeless at one time or another. So she's trying to work toward equity in housing and in labor, so that everybody can have jobs. So this, you're not supposed to have favorites, but I have to say that this woman just thrilled me as far as her take on Black Lives Matter. She's really, she said she has one voice, and she said that the healing of the U.S., this world, is that we all need to sit down at the table and talk, and that everybody's responsible to do the work. She feels like we just really need to sit down and talk to one another, even if we disagree. I wanted it to be a way to make people feel like, oh, this person could be my friend because we have these things in common. She's a tap dancer. She does a lot of tap to express her faith and her concerns about oppression. She's a college professor at Grand Rapids Community College, and she teaches English-related courses. When I met her, I said to her, because I really have gotten a lot of flack from some of my friends for taking this project on, or and a couple of relatives where they felt that I was stirring the pot, or you know, just touching subjects that maybe better be left alone. But I didn't really want to back away from it, because I wanted to try to start a conversation in a peaceful, non-confrontive way. And I did it, and I've actually had people unfriend me on Facebook because of this project, and it makes me sad, but I learned a lot. But what I said to Christina was, what if my heart is the only heart that has changed by doing this project? And her response to me was, then, well, it was all worth it. So, and so my heart has been changed. I guess that was the last image, but my heart has been changed from the project. I think just more in, I have a greater awareness of what other people's struggles are. People need to be heard, and that's what I did. I heard. Now I am writing blogs on people. I do feel bad about that. I have only got, well, I've got less than half of them done, and I'd hoped to have them done in time for the show, but they're just going to keep getting written until they're done. The images really only tell part of the story. So I had basically 60 days to find people, to photograph them, to interview them, to get the editing done, and to get things to the printer. All while taking care of a 9-year-old and during a pandemic. So I think I have to give myself credit for that, but I do feel bad that the blogs aren't all done. So anyway, so I think that's what I've got, Renee. I don't know if there are anything else.
Yeah.
That if anybody has questions or.
Well, we're just to let you know that we're very proud of you and so happy that you accepted the challenge to do this project. You know, couldn't be more thrilled. And I was going to ask you if you had a favorite, and you already told us about that. Does anyone else have any questions for Gail? You guys can go ahead and unmute yourself.
I just have a comment. I'm very amazed and impressed at the plethora of the scope of this project and how you touched so many relevant things. You know, the Black Lives Matter, the COVID thing, even the fact that even today in 2020, and my sister is in an interracial marriage, how relevant that still is, how that racism still is there, and how amazing it is that people today still are stuck in the past and aren't willing to accept this. So I think projects like yours need to be done and done and done, so that we don't lose sight of the fact that the United States of America is not a white nation. It's a nation of all colors, of all sexualities, of all identities, and even the gender superiority concept needs to go away, you know. And I think you shining a light on some of these issues is good for our nation, and is very relevant. So thank you.
I like what you said.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
I'm sorry I interrupted.
I think we have a delay in the video is also.
No, I think.
Yeah, maybe it's on my end.
Go ahead,
because
Tiffany.
I'm still seeing like the photos. You spoke of Christina. I think she was the last one, and I'm just now seeing her photos. But so it must be maybe delay on my end.
Oh, shoot.
It took me like 25 minutes to actually get on and be able to join you. I don't know who TJ Spartacus is, but he commented on my Facebook that he had troubles and then backed out, or he or she. I'm sorry. I guess I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna bet there were a few people who had problems getting on for some reason. I didn't have any more participants, Renee, that came up on my end.
Yeah.
So
we did
asking permission or anything like that.
Yeah, we did record it. So
we did record it.
I'm going to post it on our YouTube channel, and then people will be able to view it.
But the one thing that I wanted to say, and you touched on, is that we all have a better feeling about ourselves, or about, I guess, whatever it is that we believe in or feel when we're heard. There's definitely something about that makes everybody feel better when they're heard. So I really like that one.
Right.
And you could see
and I will tell you that most of the most of the participants actually said thank you for allowing me to be heard, which was pretty cool. So yeah. Okay.
Well, if no one has any other questions, we can end our meeting. And like I said, we'll post this out on YouTube. So once I get that out there, I'll let everyone know. And if you want to share it, that would be awesome. Don't forget, we have events going on tomorrow night in front of the gallery. Then we also have our open mic, which is a week from Friday. We're doing that right in front of our building as well. So we'll keep going outside as long as the weather permits. So if nothing else, have a good rest of your evening.
Thanks, Erica.
Thank you, Gail.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.